Hey guys, this is another GameMaker Studio tutorial. I wanted to show the final product, basically, what we'll end up with, which will be kind of like a little platformer, side-scroller style. You'll be able to run around using the arrow keys on your keyboard. Using the spacebar, you'll be able to jump, of course. You'll also be learning a little bit about views and just a small amount of arguments. First thing we're going to need to do is go ahead and create a player sprite. You can rename it player. Make him 32 by 32. And be sure to make two of them. Make him, give him little eyes, mouth. And then you can actually just kind of copy him, paste using Control-C, Control-V. Control-C is for copy, Control-V is for paste. You want to go into the picture, seeing as we only have one, and then go into this mirror flip. Then it'll switch them over. So you'll have two. You'll have one facing to the right, and one facing to the left. Once you're done with that, go ahead and create another little sprite. You can name it whatever you want. Sprite block. It's basically going to be the ground. Make him 32 by 32. Now before we start creating objects, let's go ahead and go into scripts. And you're going to want to create a new script, of course. Just right click, create script. And you can rename it up here. Rename it script at move, and this will actually be the little bit of the tutorial where you actually use the arguments. And don't be intimidated by this too much. It's actually not as difficult as it looks. First off, let's go and start by putting down 4 arguments. I say 4 even though they're listed as 0, 1, 2, and 3. You should know that if you start an argument, it'll start off as argument 0, then argument 1, then argument 2, then argument 3. It always starts off at 0. And I already did the checks for this. You may want to change them later on, but I'll explain what they are as I go along. Basically, what it's going to do is it's going to check if the speed of what would be attached to the script, so if your player is attached to the script, the speed of your player is higher than argument 3. Argument 3 is 15. Then the vertical speed equals 15. So just make sure that it doesn't continue to climb more or less, or it doesn't go over 15. It just kind of resets it. Then it checks in the same thing if the place is free, so that whenever our character is moving, it checks X, Y. Make sure that there isn't a block in front of it. Here, let me see if I can actually bring this up real quick. If you notice how the character just runs into the wall, he can't go any further than that. Or here, if he try and jump, he's kind of stuck. He won't jump. That's basically what that does. Let me go back here. Basically, it checks to make sure that there's an available space, and if there isn't, then, or I guess if there is, sorry, it says that gravity direction equals argument 1. Now, what is 270? Where do we get 270 from? And what is gravity direction? Let's go and go back over here. And you want to go to your wiki.yoyogames.com, and you'll be able to look up various oh, sorry, wrong one. You'll be able to look up various I guess functions. Yeah, and that's what they are. You'll be able to look up the functions, and gravity direction basically says which direction is the gravity affecting. 270. So we've got set ours to 270. Well, how do we get 270? Go back to, again, wiki. If you type in direction on the wiki, it generally has a little search up on the right hand side. You go down here. If you look, it actually gives you an example of how direction works in GameMaker. If you put in direction, it starts off basically, if it were to the right, it starts off at 0, and it works its way counterclockwise. So if you look at 270, 270 would be straight down, which is what we want our gravity to be, is straight down. So it sets gravity again to direction 270 using argument 1, and then it sets the gravity itself to argument 2, which is 0.6. How much gravity do you want per se? You know, do you want 1? That'll increase the gravity speed a little bit, so he'll fall quicker. If you go to 0.2, it'll make him kind of glide almost, give that glide effect. Let's see if we can actually change this and show an example of it. Change it from 0.6 to 0.2. So it's more or less how much the gravity really affects the player. See? So you can always go back in and change it around. Move. Sorry about that. I don't know why I shut that down. But gravity, you can always, like I said, come back in here and change it. I'm going to reset it back to, I actually set 0.7. I don't like it at 0.6. Now then, as I was saying, it checks to see if the place is free, and it would create this coding. Now if it isn't, then of course, you know, you're sitting on top of the ground or whatever else. Gravity direction is still, of course, 270. You have to put that in. So argument 1 would be direction of gravity. But back to this, again, like I said, if it's free, if not, else, you put in else, open up the little code, direction, gravity, you set it to 0, because if there's something there, then there really shouldn't be any kind of gravity at all. And these right here are going to be your checks for basically the character movement and the jump. Very simple. If keyboard check, and it checks the keyboard itself. If you press the space key, and if the space above you is free, basically, or not free, sorry, motion set 270 minus 10. Now I'll go ahead and actually let y'all figure out what motion set is. Not because I'm trying to be a dick, but just because it helps to learn a few things on your own every now and again. You know, you can get your own outlook on it, basically. But if anything, it should be very simple to actually figure out what this is and what it does. Next one would be the left. Go to the left, keyboard check left, place free, checks it. If there's enough space, 4 little blocks. If not, then, you know, of course it wouldn't move, but seeing as there is, it'll change x to minus equals argument 0, which would be 4. So basically moves him over. Alright, now that we're done with that, we'll go and go into the objects. Go ahead and create 2 different objects. The first object is going to be your object player. The second object is going to be your object block, which is basically going to be the ground. Be sure to attach your sprites. So your player has your player sprite, your block has whatever you decided to name it, if it was a block. On the block, be sure to hit both visible and solid. Make sure that they're both checked. You won't have to put any code into the block, but in the player, you're going to want to start by adding an event. Just a regular step, not a begin or an end, just regular step. Then go to Control, go to Execute Code, drag the Execute Code over, and it'll open up. And this is where we're going to want to put the script move. basically on every step, whenever you hit, left, right, or space, it'll recognize and he'll either move left, right, or if you hit the space key, he'll of course jump. You're then going to want to add a collision event with your block. Do the same thing, go to Control, Execute Code, drag it over and drop it. When you open it up, it's going to have Move Contact Solid. It's going to want direction and the max distance, and then vertical speed. So basically, if it's contacting, vertical speed set to 0. Rather simple. This one's going to be another one. You can go into the wiki again, go and look it up and see what you come up with. Not very hard. Should be actually very, very simple for everybody. The last one is going to be a draw event. Just a regular draw event, not a draw GUI or anything else. Drag it over, drop it. Be sure to set your image speed to 0. Image speed is basically kind of shuffles through the sub-images, and sometimes it can mess up and make your player basically look like he's spazzing out really bad. Then from there, we'll go if keyboard check, VK right, which basically checks if the player is pressing the right arrow on the keyboard. It'll draw the sprite, which will be the first one. Player. First sub-image, which is actually 0. Again, they all start at 0. Place it at X and Y. Oh, delete that. That isn't supposed to be there. Place it at X and Y. And what that'll do is it'll basically place it over itself. So you don't have to be like, oh, well, it's, the player's over here or whatever else. If they're not pressing the keyboard, else, draw sprite, player, sub-image 0, which will have them facing right. If you remember, sub-image 0 was facing right. Again, X and Y. Finish that off. If keyboard check, now it checks if he's pressing the left arrow key. If he's pressing the left arrow key on the keyboard, draw sprite, player, again. Sub-image 1, because it was actually the one that was facing to the left, so it'll draw him walking towards the left, or facing towards the left, I'm sorry about that. Again, X and Y, just so it'll draw it over itself. And that's really about it on this one. Now there are a few other things that you do need to do. Of course, first of all, you need to place your player and place little blocks wherever you want to create a ground. But another thing you want to do is you want to go into your views, and depending on what you're using, I just did it, this is just of course as an example, you're going to want to use enable views, visible when room starts, 640 by 480 is normal, that's fine. Go down to object following. What that's going to do is it's going to have the camera follow the player, so that whenever he moves off to the right hand side, or if he starts climbing up further into the room, the camera will actually follow him rather than the character just kind of moving on its own and the room standing still. H4 and B4 are basically how far the camera is from the player. Here, let me go ahead and start it up real quick. Now, notice when my character moves, it waits a little bit before the camera actually starts moving with the player. But notice that more or less that negative space right here that's not being affected anymore. That's what the bore is down here in the views. The higher it is, of course, the closer it'll be to your player, and it'll move room-wise. Or you can bring it down a little bit and it'll give you that little bit of space. And again, it'll work with moving upwards. And of course, that's the end of the room there, so. But again, it follows your character. And that's it, guys.